Hello everyone, I'm Neeraj from IELTS to the point. Today we are going to review how IELTS looks like in 2020. In this session, we are going to cover what is IELTS, what are the exam dates, when can you appear for IELTS. Then we are also going to look at who can appear for IELTS. Are you eligible for IELTS or not? Then we are also going to go through the syllabus, or let's say pattern or format of IELTS test. And then we are going to go through individual sections on IELTS, that is IELTS Listening, Reading, Writing, and Speaking. So let's begin exploring what is IELTS. IELTS is International English Language Testing Systems, and it is nothing but an English proficiency test for non-native speakers. Now the question is, what do you exactly mean by English proficiency test? It means that the IELTS determines how well can you use English. Now, when we say how well can you use English, it does not refer to usage of grammar or specific vocabulary. It means can you use English language in daily life? Can you listen to what other person is saying and understand the point of view of the other person? Can you read the newspaper and understand the news, or if there are any instructions or advertisements, can you understand and work accordingly? Also, can you express yourself while you're speaking or conversing with some other person? And at the end of the day, can you write in English so that others understand what do you want to express? The next question is, who conducts IELTS? IELTS is conducted worldwide by three main companies. The first one is Cambridge English Language Assessment, the second is British Council, and the third is IDP Australia. As I said earlier, IELTS tests you on listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Now the next question is, when is this exam conducted? This exam is conducted all over the world throughout the year. But if we talk about India, in India, paper-based test is conducted 2 to 3 times in a month in most of the cities. It could vary a bit here and there, but that's the case. And now I'm talking about before COVID-19 situation. Currently, during COVID-19 crisis, it may not be the case. Also, computer-based tests are conducted all over India and in most of the parts of the world, and it is probably offered every week, again in most of the centers, at least in India. Now the next question is, can I appear for IELTS? Absolutely you can. Cambridge or British Council or IDP doesn't restrict you in any way as long as you have valid identity proof. But the real question depends on what do you want to do after that. Now there are two purposes why people want to give IELTS or appear for it. The first purpose is if you want to study in an English speaking country or in an institution which has English as its medium of instruction. Now you could be appearing for IELTS because you want to take admission in bachelor's courses or in master's courses or for PhD as well. Okay, so it really depends on for which university or for which course are you applying to, and is that course in 100% English? That means the medium of instruction in that particular institution is English or not. You need to check that first. If that's the case, then you can definitely go for IELTS. The second purpose is that if you want to immigrate to countries like Canada and Australia, which are offering PR or permanent residency visas for skillful workers. Now, depending on the purpose of IELTS, there are two types of IELTS broadly. The first type is IELTS Academic. As the name suggests, IELTS Academic is attempted by those students who want to study abroad. Whereas the second one is IELTS General Training. This exam or this type of IELTS is necessary when you want to immigrate and settle down in an English speaking country. Now when it comes to IELTS format, we need to understand that IELTS is offered in two ways. The first one is the paper-based test, where you are given the question papers and the answer sheets, and you need to write everything on paper using pen or pencil. The second way is the computer-based test, which has been there for hardly last 8 months or so, at least in India. Alright, so this is another and new way of appearing for IELTS, where everything will be computerized except for speaking. Now IDP in fact is trying to offer IELTS speaking section as well on computer through virtual meeting, but that it's not available everywhere. In both the formats, the time allotted for IELTS is about 2 hours 45 minutes. But understand, in these 2 hours 45 minutes, in both the cases, you will be appearing for only listening, reading and writing sections and not for speaking sections. Speaking section is 11 to 14 minutes of interview, which is conducted separately. Now it could happen that your speaking appointment is on the same day, or it could be on some other day as well. Another similarity between IELTS paper-based test and IELTS computer-based test is the fact that both are scored in the same way. If you don't attempt anything, you will be given band 0, obviously. And if you cannot use English at all, but you at least attempt something, you will be given band 1. But even though you are a non-native speaker and you can use English very similar or exactly like a native speaker, chances are you will be able to score band 9. That means if you are able to use English just like native speaker can, you are going to score full bands on this. So overall scale of scores on IELTS is 0 bands to 9 bands. Now let's talk about IELTS pattern or syllabus. The word syllabus probably is not appropriate in this case because IELTS doesn't recommend a specific book using which you will be able to crack it. Rather, there is a fixed pattern on IELTS and we are going to look for that pattern now. Let's begin with IELTS listening section. In IELTS listening section, you will have about 4 parts. In each part, you will listen to an audio and try to answer about 10 questions based on that audio. So overall, you appear for about 40 questions in about 30 minutes. In part 1, you usually listen to a conversation between two individuals in everyday setting. In part 2, you listen to a monologue set in a social context. In part 3, you listen for a conversation between about 4 individuals in a university or in an academic setting. And in part 4, you'll be listening to a monologue in a university lecture. Now the answer sheet for IELTS listening section looks something like this as seen on your screen. You will notice that at the top you have to give your personal details and then you have space to answer your 40 questions. As far as computer delivered test is concerned, you have to answer your questions then and there. Alright, so even though at the beginning I said that there are 30 minutes for listening section, in paper delivered test or paper based test, you will get 10 minutes extra to check your answers and to transfer your answers from question papers to the answer sheets. Whereas in computer delivered test, since you are marking your answers at the same time and when you are listening to the questions or when you are listening to the audio, and that's the reason you get about 2 minutes to check your answers on IELTS computer delivered test. Now let's come to IELTS reading section. In IELTS reading section, you will be reading a passage and then you will be answering some questions on those passages. Overall, you will solve about 40 questions in about 60 minutes. Now, as far as IELTS academic module is concerned, you will be reading passages from academia or passages which you would read otherwise in your textbooks. The difficulty level of this information is very suitable for students who want to appear for bachelor's or master's. It doesn't matter whether you're going for bachelor's or master's. The passages are designed or written in such a way that both students can deal with these passages. You will read about 3 passages when it comes to IELTS academic reading, and you will be solving about 13 to 14 questions on each of those passages. But when it comes to IELTS general training, you will have about 3 defined parts. In part 1, IELTS will be testing your ability to find and provide general facts. Generally, you will have about 2 different passages in part 1, and combined you will have about 13 to 14 questions based on them. In part 2, the general topic will be related to workplace situations, and again there would be about 2 passages in part 2 as well. In part 3, however, you will have a long passage which is related to general reading from newspapers or magazines, and then on that one long passage you will have to solve about 13 to 14 questions again. The answer sheet for IELTS reading section is very similar to that of IELTS listening section. Now let's come to the most dreaded section on IELTS, that is IELTS writing section. On IELTS writing, you will have about 2 tasks to attempt in about 60 minutes. Writing task 1 and writing task 2. Writing task 1 is different for academic and general training module, whereas writing task 2 is the same for both types of IELTS. Now when it comes to writing task 1 on academic section, you will have to write a report. Now this report could be describing facts or figures presented in 1 or more graphs, charts or tables on a related topic. At the same time, it could be otherwise describing working of a machine, a device or a process by referring to a diagram. To do this, IELTS says that you should spend about 20 minutes and you should write at least 150 words. When it comes to IELTS writing task 1 for general training, you will be writing a letter. So, you will be presented with a daily situation in the letter, and you are also given certain instructions so that you have an idea what to include in that letter. Again, very similar to the previous task, you will have about 150 words to write and about 20 minutes to write those many words. Typically, the answer sheet for writing task 1 in both modules looks something like this. Now let's come to writing task 2 or essay writing. This particular task is common for both IELTS academic as well as IELTS general training. On this task, you will be given a topic to write your essay or to discuss that topic, and you must write at least 250 words. To do this, IELTS advises that you should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Now let's come to IELTS speaking section. On speaking section for IELTS, you have to appear for an interview in person. In the actual IELTS exam, you will have a person asking you questions. Although recently, IDP has started offering virtual speaking tests as well, where an examiner, an IELTS examiner, will be offering or asking you questions through video conferencing. Overall, in all types of variations as far as IELTS speaking is concerned, the format remains the same. It's an 11 to 14 minutes of interview in which you will have to go through 3 parts or 3 sections of the test. Now let's analyze the 3 parts in IELTS speaking test one by one. In part 1, you will be asked about 8 to 10 questions. you can observe that there are generally 2 to 3 subparts or 2 to 3 themes in this particular part 1. In the initial phase, most of the questions would be related to you. For example, what's your name, where are you from, and all these things. In the second subpart, or in the later half in part 1, the questions would be more about your hobbies or your surroundings or things around you, the places that you visit, and so on and so forth. So all you need to do is understand the question and try to answer it in best capacity that you can. Now let's talk about IELTS Speaking Part 2 or Cue card. In this part, the examiner is going to give you a card having a situation and 4 questions. The examiner will offer you 1 minute to prepare. In this 1 minute, you can take notes if you wish. And after that, you have to speak using your notes for about 1 to 2 minutes. In the last part, that is part 3, you will be asked again about 6 to 8 questions. The structure of part 3 is very similar to that in part 1. The examiner is going to ask you questions and you need to answer those questions. As simple as that. There is no preparation time, there is no response time. Normally here as well, you will notice 2 subparts or 2 themes as far as part 3 is concerned. Initially, the questions would be very much related to what you have already talked about in part 2. Whereas the later questions would demand your opinion or what you think about certain issues in society, or again the topic on which you talked already in the cue card. I hope you have understood what IELTS is all about. If you want to know more, subscribe to our channel and like this video. Share it as much as possible. Thank you.